Hello, welcome everybody to the Polacca Historic Preservation Board meeting on February 4th, 2021. Mary, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I know I'm still talking to the mic.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Who would like to lead us in the invocation, please? Linda?
I don't know what it is.
The prayer.
I don't have a prayer.
Okay,
Never
we're done.
done this before.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful this day for the opportunity that we have to meet together. We're grateful for this free land and pray that thou bless it, bless our leaders, watch over and protect us. We ask you at this time to be with those that are not here, that if they're on their way, that they might be able to travel in safety. These things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank you. Could we have roll call, please?
Laura Schoenberger,
Here.
Mary Reese,
Here.
Linda Little Craybill,
Present.
Present.
Miss Robbie Correa.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to have the swearing in ceremony for Linda Craybill.
I can stay here. Okay. My name's spelled wrong. Oh, you did? Okay, good.
Miss Craybill, if you don't mind raising your right hand. I, Linda Little Craybill,
I, Linda Little Crable,
a Historic Preservation Board appointee,
Historic Preservation Board appointee,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully perform the duties
that I will faithfully perform the duties
of my appointed office
of my appointed office
and will support and honor
and support and honor
to the best of my ability
to the best of my ability
all applicable laws of the state of Florida,
all applicable laws to the state of Florida,
Putnam County,
Putnam County,
the city of Polacca,
the city of Polacca,
as well as the beliefs,
vision,
mission,
mission,
policies, procedures,
policies, procedures,
codes of ethics and codes of conduct
codes of ethics and codes of conduct
of the City of Polacca Historic Preservation Board.
of the City of Polacca Historic Preservation Board.
I hereby through this oath
I hereby through this oath
affirm that I will perform
affirm that I will perform the duties
of this public trust
of this public trust
in a fair, equitable, and ethical
in a fair, equitable, and ethical manner,
befitting the dignity
befitting the dignity
and responsibilities of the office.
and responsibilities of the office.
Thank you, Ms. Craybill.
Okay, do I need to sign?
Yes, but whenever you're ready.
Okay, on to the next agenda item. It's a new year, so it's time to select a chair and vice chair for the Historic Preservation Board. Do we have any nominations for chair?
I would nominate you.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
I hereby.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion.
Oh, Larry beat you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we have a motion from Larry. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, do we have a nomination for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Linda Craybill.
Okay, do we have any other nominations? Do we have a motion?
Motion, Larry Beaton.
Okay, motion from Larry, second.
Second.
Second from Mary, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It was like deja vu, that was painless.
Okay.
Okay, We have roll call again. Is that a typo? Okay, we need to take a roll call. Okay, roll call.
Oh.
Okay,
Which I
roll call,
haven't.
please.
Mary Race,
Present.
Linda Little Craybill,
Present.
Laura Schoenberger,
Present.
Roberta Correa,
Present.
and Larry Beaton is on Zoom.
Yes.
And Richard Stackpole is not here.
Okay, I'm going to read the appeal procedures and ex parte communications. Anybody had any ex parte communications on either of these cases on the agenda? Okay, no ex parte conversations or communications. Appeal procedure. Notice any person aggrieved by a decision of the board may within 15 days thereafter apply to the city commission for review of the board's decision. Such application must be filed with the city manager in writing. Objections by property owners to National Register nominations must be notarized to be included in the record, section 54-4-74, Polacca Municipal Code. Any person wishing to appeal any decision made by the Historic Preservation Board with respect to any matter considered at such meeting will need a record of the proceedings, and for such purpose may need to ensure that a verbatim record of the proceedings is made, which record includes the testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is to be based. Florida Statute 286-0105. Okay, approval of minutes. Did everybody have an opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting in December?
I move we accept them.
Okay, we have a motion to accept. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now it's time for public comments. Do we have any public comments, or do we want to have the comments specific to a case?
We have a general public comment from Michelle Bruno and Marcia Gano.
Okay. Could you please come up to the podium and give your name and address for public record? Okay.
Please turn the microphone on at the podium.
Can I take this off to speak or do I have
You
to
can,
keep
if
it
you're
on?
comfortable with it. I've got mine on.
Okay, I mean, I'll stand back and everything. Okay, so we just purchased property here. We're renovating the homes. We're very excited about it. We love the community. And we're meeting with Bernadette on Monday to explain what we're going to do. But for today, I was just hoping to understand how we can expedite a roof repair. We're concerned about water getting into the house and damaging the structure. So we can line up to get the roofs replaced as quickly as we're allowed to do. And I just want to know, what do I have to do to get that done so I don't have my house ruined?
Do you want to address this, Ms. Fisher, or do you want me? Okay, I can tell you what's happened historically. If it's an emergency or crisis situation, that's been able to be approved in office by the planning director. Is it a change in materials, or is it the same material for the roofing?
It's the, what do we call that?
One of them is a change in material and one of them is not.
But it's the same material that's on the other homes in the area.
Okay. So
I'm not putting
basically,
anything
you're going to
on.
convert them both to metal, and one currently now is shingled and one is metal. Okay. So that could be approved by Ms. Fisher, I think. We've done that before. The precedent has been set. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's all we needed to hear. And then we'll work out everything else.
Okay,
on Monday with her.
okay, thank you.
Great. thank
I'd
you
like to
very
say
much.
they're doing a wonderful job.
They're sweet little houses. They look beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Okay. New business, case HPB 21-0, request for a certificate of appropriateness by Robert Taylor for removal of wooden ramp and landing ramp along the east side, existing windows on the south side, and restore wall and construct the southeast side at 200 Main Street, Polacca, Florida. Parcel ID number 42-10-27-6850-0090-0020. Ms. Fisher?
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
or late afternoon. As mentioned before you is St. Mark's Episcopal Church the Parish Hall is actually what they are in the process of doing some external building improvements. And the property is located at the northwest corner of Main Street and North Second Street. They're trying to get the PowerPoint up. Okay. And the property is approximately 1.49 acres in size. And of course, the existing land use is a religious institution or church, as we generally call it. Can we turn the slides, please?
God bless you.
The next slide. Again. Okay, and this is just basically giving a general location map for where the property is located, which again is the northwest corner of Main Street and North Second Street. And this is an aerial view of the property. And this is to give a general idea as to the North Historic District, just to show that the property is located within the North Historic District boundary. And this is the Parish Hall. This is standing in a easterly direction, facing it westerly. This is the front of the building. Okay, this is on the south side of the building. And this is just to give an idea as to some of the improvements that are being proposed. And next is the another portion of the south side. And this is to give an idea as to what the conditions are of the property at this time. And this is the renovation plan that was provided just to demonstrate as to what improvements that are being proposed. And with that, in review of the request and all of the supportive documentation that was provided, we found that the request is consistent with the general character of the North Historic District. And we recommend approval. And if you would like, I can read every one of the request, every request located on the slide, or we could just say in general on what's shown on the slide. It's also in the staff report as well. And if there are any questions, I can stand for any questions.
Any questions from the board?
Madam Chair. Madam Chair,
Yes,
I have a question of staff.
okay, sorry.
Could you,
Go ahead,
could-
Larry.
oh, I'm sorry. Could you go back to the photograph of the south view of the building and put your pointer over the two windows that are there, that are in the request to be modified?
Okay.
I just wasn't clear exactly which windows they were.
And the applicant is here if you also would like for him to give further information.
Okay. If you're not clear about which two windows it is, if you want the applicant to respond to that, that would be fine.
Okay.
Mr. Taylor, could you come up, please? And give your name and add.
Existing and two of the new. Do you have the existing pictures in your packet? This shows the two windows, I think when you were in. Yeah, that's existing, that's proposed, and that's existing.
Didn't see it proposed.
There's,
the windows were the only item that I couldn't find detail about in the packet that we were presented with. So that's the reason I was asking. And I cannot hear Mr. Taylor if he's speaking.
He's not yet. 1 second. Mr. Taylor, could you give your name and address for the record, please?
Bob Taylor, 710 St. John's Avenue, Palatka, Florida. Mr. Beaton, we did turn in photographs of the existing conditions on the south wall. There are two arched windows on the south side, which are partially closed over originally because they were walled off on the inside. This renovation proposes to remove them. One of the things that the church is desirous of doing is renovating those interior spaces to restrooms. So it's unhandy to have tall windows in restrooms. We did have those photographs, Ms. Fisher. I'm sorry that I do not see them in your packet, and unfortunately, I didn't bring additional copies with me.
Mr. Taylor, in staff's PowerPoint presentation, there is a view of the south side of the building. There's one photograph of the south side. I just wondered if you could point out in that view which are the two windows in question.
I can show you about where they are. Of course, they've been photoshopped out, Mr. Beaton, but I'll show you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what we did. We showed you the before and the after.
I don't see the after.
That's it. All right, hold on a second. There are two windows right about here,
No.
and they're actually arched windows at that location. Okay? And this is the after picture, showing the windows
Okay.
removed
Showing
And-
the removal after.
and board and
removal.
batten, yeah. And there was also a concrete ramp at that location, which is going to be removed. So that, again, this is part of the after, what it would look like after the windows and the ramp were removed.
Okay, the two, as far as you can determine, the two windows that the applicant is desirous to remove, are those, do you think those are original to the building?
I know that the building was modified and added to. This is probably a later addition. Father Bob, perhaps you have insight to that? Were these? Mhm. Mhm.
Father Bob, can you come up, give me your name, please, and address, if you're going to, for the public record?
I didn't recognize it.
He's in disguise, but I
Yes.
finally figured out who it was.
If you go back to that,
Okay,
It-
name and address for the record, please.
Robert Marsh at 211 Madison Street, Polacca, Florida. Okay, hold that just like that. You see that window that's there?
Yes.
Yeah, the rectangular window, Larry?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that window is about, you're familiar with the interior that the parish hall, aren't you, Larry?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's about where the chandelier is.
Okay.
That whole shed roof area was our parish legend is that used to be this from the St. Mark's Academy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And this has been added on to in at least 2, maybe 3 phases. We're not, the legend says that Bard Gale did it, Larry,
Oh, okay.
commercial fisherman.
Right, right.
The windows would be, that were there are actually maybe a later date, but they're just double hung, they were double hung windows, just, sash, double hung. And in order to make the bathrooms in there ADA compliant, we had to add a lot more space in order to allow the radii. This is going to be the women's bathroom on this end. And so they removed those windows and put the board and bat, put the boards and bats where the windows are. So
Okay.
it's exactly, The boards and battens are just like the original stuff.
Okay. Has this already been done, or is this what's being proposed?
This is a photo, I understand this is Photoshop.
Okay, but the windows haven't actually been removed yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, the windows have been removed. They're
Oh,
just-
they have been removed.
They have been removed, but it's just unpainted boards and bat over where those areas are.
So is this, we're coming for permission after the fact then? Is this like, since the windows have already been removed? I'm kind of a little.
Well, this I can tell you, Bob can answer those kind of things, but I can tell you that the ramp is there. And if you go over to St. Mark's and look right now, the boards and bats are tacked in there. The windows have been pulled out.
Okay.
And
That's just for security.
yeah, yes.
Okay.
So the openings for the windows are still on the inside of the building right now?
I'd say again, Larry?
So the openings for those two windows are still on the inside of the building right now?
Yes.
Okay, there's just batting over the outside.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. Had you considered in the remodel to save maybe the upper portions of those windows? In other words, from basically the upper sash where you would have privacy in the restrooms, but you wouldn't just have a blank wall on that side, that there would still be the semblance of a half window for each of those windows. Is that considered? And would that work as, maybe this is a better question for Mr. Taylor, would that work as far as the plans for that space?
Mr. Beaton, we did consider something like that, but as Father Bob mentioned, that wall is being furred out. It's just a 2x4 wall, and we're going to make it like a 2x6 wall because all the plumbing, that's going to be the plumbing wall.
Oh, okay.
Vents and risers in the wall as well as supplies. It'd be a very tedious effort to try to preserve the windows. So
I understand.
I just didn't feel like it was a practical solution.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm sure you're aware that when we consider something that is viewable by the public from the public street or public sidewalk, that we try to lean in favor of keeping the building, especially if it's architecturally correct from its origin, and realizing that this was a later addition to this particular building. But, that's kind of been the way that the board has looked at that in trying to preserve that as much as possible. So that was the reason for my question.
Yes, sir. We understand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further board questions? Any public questions, comments? Okay. Okay, is somebody willing to make a motion? I'll consider a motion.
I move we accept this plan.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you all.
I grew up across the street from St. Mark's, and that building was not there when I was growing up. So.
Since you're traveling that kind of company, I kind of expect you to be a little bit honest.
Okay, the next agenda item is a discussion direction regarding an ordinance amending section 94-261 of the Polacca Municipal Code pertaining to the location of parking facilities for existing residential structures. Mr. Holmes?
Thank you. How are you today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Seeing Bible up here, it kind of suggested maybe I should start preaching, but maybe that's wrong. The minutes, and I guess, I don't know if Sonny did them but the minutes are very, in my opinion, accurate in terms of the question at hand. You remember we brought this to you, or I did, at the last meeting. and indicated that you should feel free to consider it. And then maybe at this meeting, you could take a position. It's on the issue of parking. And as the minutes suggest, right now, under our current ordinances, parking is prohibited in the front yard and in the right-of-way of our streets, front yard of residential homes and right-of-way of our streets. The issue arose as to whether or not it might be appropriate, beneficial to allow for a single parking space in the right-of-way in front of homes that don't have adequate room between the boundary line and the house to allow people to access the backyard where they might park. And they also don't have a driveway and a garage, so that they can't park, in a designated spot, since they can't park in the front yard either. And right now in the historic district, most of them are parking in the street, if they don't have any place else to park. But when we actually planned for a couple of those parking spaces in the historic district, there were complaints. And so in an effort to try to give the public input on how we move forward with this, we brought the matter to you for your thoughts. And the options, of course, would be that you weigh in and say that you don't want parking in the right-of-way in the historic district, period, which is what our current ordinance says. So you'd actually be saying you don't want to provide for exemptions or variances from the current ordinances, and you just don't want parking in the right-of-way, period, and you don't want parking. The ordinance already requires or prohibits parking in the front yard. So that would mean that if you don't have a driveway and a carport, or at least a driveway and an access to the backyard in the historic district, you have no place to park but the street, because you can't park in the front yard. And the other option was that, I guess the third option or second option would be that you just say anybody you can put a parking pad in the right of way anywhere without any conditions having to be met. And I'm not telling you that your vote's going to be conclusive. I'm just saying that we're looking for your input. And the other option was the one that we had talked about, which would have allowed for a parking pad to be placed in front of a home if the home met certain criteria. And that those criteria would be that it's a residential structure, and because of space and lot limitations, there was no way that the people could park in the rear of the home. There was no driveway, and by ordinance you can't park in the front. In that event, it would allow for the zoning board of appeals to grant a variance, and there would be criteria, the pad, only one pad, 10 by 20, and the physical makeup of the pad could be essentially established for compatibility with whatever area you're in. If it goes in front of, if the pad is proposed for a home in the historic district, it would also require that it go in front of you for the preservation board before it went to the ZBOA for your input. Those were the options. As I told you at the time, honestly, the truth is staff doesn't really have a preference on this. So it's not something that I'm here asking you to do. It's something I'm here truly just trying to get your input on. And then at some point, the city commission will make the ultimate decision about their thoughts on this, because it would require either a passage of a new ordinance or modification of existing ordinances. So I didn't realize it would raise as much apparent strong feelings as it has, but I'm not criticizing that at all. I'm just saying that when we first looked at it, we thought it was sort of an accommodation where you couldn't park anywhere but the street, because I was under the assumption that people would not find parking on the street to be a preferred option, where your streets are narrow and someone's having to exit a vehicle into the street, et cetera, et cetera. But that may not be the case, and I have found that out from some of the comments that have been made. So it's here for your recommendation. As I indicated, You're not passing an ordinance, you're not, and your vote won't be conclusive, but it will be something that will be presented to, and the city commission will be made aware of your thoughts, at least as they relate to the historic district, you know. So do you have any question about the kind of the issue before you?
I do.
Okay.
After our last meeting, I drove down in that area and saw some where the parking pads were made. There was just one per house. So would that limit parking to one vehicle per home?
Well,
What
the
is the
idea,
provision? You know, most people have at least 2 cars.
I know, and you know, I guess that's an issue, but from our perspective, we thought that allowing for a larger space than 10 by 20 might become problematic. So it was sort of a compromise, and in our mind, and compromises, you know, necessarily don't necessarily extol the virtues of only, you know, any one particular option. They're a blend. So our thought was, I hear what you're saying, and it may still leave a problem, but it would at least give people the option of parking a vehicle off of the road, off the street. And for instance, if there's one vehicle that stays at home, one's used to go to work, it's an option. And so I think there's only one pad over there right now that's poured. I believe that is the case. So we did
2?
2 poured. Okay. And we did, I think, leave a curb, perhaps accommodation for a third one before we started getting the pushback. But I mean, obviously if, for instance, the ultimate decision is no, we don't want them in the right of way, then we'll take action to get those that are already in place up. Because they are in violation of the applicable ordinance right now. So that's where our thinking is, just to get input. I mean, we quickly realized that there was controversy about it. And once we did, we said that, you know, our thinking was, let's get input from the boards, Historic Preservation Board, and then the citizens can weigh in at the commission meeting. I'm not sure if we decided whether to put it in front of the planning commission or not, but at least the commission and this board, but right now, the real issue is in the historic preservation. I mean, in the historic districts. So, so that's kind of where we are.
I guess my point is, I didn't see it, and you said a compromise, so it's kind of a halfway solution that doesn't really solve the
Well,
problem.
it's a solution, but I might,
If
you
the
know,
problem is cars parked in the street, that doesn't take away all the cars in the street. So that
but
was
where do
just-
you go then? I
it's-
mean, I have, for instance, I personally have 4 cars. I don't live in the historic district, but
Mhm.
how many spaces do you give me to make sure that nobody parks where they're not
And
supposed
that's
to?
my point.
Yeah,
So-
where do you start and where do you end? sort of
Exactly.
thing. There actually are not that many, at least in the South Historic Districts. I haven't analyzed the North, but there's really not that many properties that don't have alternative parking to street, other
There's
than
not.
maybe, there's probably
I-
3 or 4,
I
maybe?
believe we said
3.
3.
Yeah.
And that's why and I say I won't say that I'm the author of the idea, but when I heard of it, I thought it was reasonable. There are only 3, we thought. So rather than have those 3 not be able to park in a space, they're jumping the curb now and
Yeah.
parking on the right of way, which we didn't think was sightly. It's not necessarily that good for the curb or the cars or anything else. So we thought we were doing something reasonable by making the curb accommodate vehicular travel and having a 10 by 20 space there. But as I said, we quickly learned that wasn't deemed reasonable in everybody's eyes. So I understand it's not perfect. And I mean, I get the fact that it's not, and some people may have more than one vehicle and they may still park on the street. But our thinking was, at least if you had one vehicle, we give you an option. And that was our thinking. Only if you meet the criteria. We weren't proposing to allow everyone in the historic district or anywhere else have a 10 by 20 slab in the right of way. As I said, if you read the minutes, it shows that it would have to be a property which didn't lend itself to having parking on the lot itself, so that you were kind of forced to either choose between the street and the right of way, or you can't park in the front yard. And we also note that in granting any variance, you'd have to take into account water, sewer, and infrastructure, that was in the area, so you don't end up doing something that complicates any of that. So, as I said, it's not, nothing has been adopted. We basically waited to give you a chance to meet again, and after hearing about it for the first time at the last meeting, give you a chance to, think about it, and so you could offer your opinion, and your opinion will be taken to the next board level. And if the commission says leave it like it is, fine. If the commission likes the idea in spite of what you say or I say, good. I mean, they're the elected officials that set policy. We wanted to get your input. And we probably will want to get the input of the planning commission too, just to see what their thoughts are, because obviously you speak for or to the historic districts, but the ordinance wouldn't be limited to the historic district. The only reason the historic district would be sort of singled out is because an application for parking pad in the historic district would require that it come before you, whereas if it's outside the historic district, it won't have to go before you, it just go before the ZBOA.
Would the requirement, haven't read this whole thing, and would they have to put a concrete or brick pad there?
Well, the composition would be something that would be fixed as part of the variance. So for instance, if it's in the historic district, and you guys said, yeah, we think it could be compatible, but we'd like it to be brick or paver or whatever of course the case might be, then that would be, one of the conditions of the granting of the variance.
But it wouldn't be grass, you just leave?
No, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think the grass basically doesn't do much to change what's happening right now, other than you might eliminate the curb.
And the grass
hopping.
doesn't survive anyway if you keep parking on it.
Right.
so.
It probably won't survive anyway. So no, it would have to be some impervious surface. And then obviously the 10 by 20, that brings up something else. I mean, I don't think that having a few pads under the limited circumstances of the grant of a variance is going to change the impervious surface ratio of boat load. But the bigger you make those parking lots or those parking pads, and the more of them you have, at some point, you could theoretically, I guess, affect the percentage of impervious surface on a lot, which we don't want to get into either.
Well, don't you think that it would set a precedent for anybody that would want to do it, even though they'd have to come before us or y'all to get a variance?
What do you mean by precedent? I mean, it gives them the option.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It
Gives
gives
them
them
the
the
option.
option, but I think you're going to look at the criteria again, whatever that may
Right,
be.
yeah, okay. I just,
Yeah.
Make a
not everybody's
determination
gonna say,
based
I
on
want
that.
an extra parking
I
spot.
think the precedent's being set right now. You don't have a place to park, go ahead and park on the right of way.
Yeah.
And
I like
but-
the idea of blending with brick or pavers or something. It wouldn't be quite as stark as concrete.
And if they didn't want to go to that expense, then that's their option. I mean, not being harsh about it or anything, but you're trying to balance between something that's aesthetically compatible with the neighborhood and not doing it at all. And sometimes it's another compromise. So that there are going to be some of the lot owners that probably won't like the fact they have to use a specific material, but that's sort of.
You buy into it when you buy into the district. You buy
Exactly.
into the specific requirements.
So
Exactly.
the thing about it is, people have bought into the district without that now. Now, future people will have to realize that.
Well, that's, I think.
But you have a limited number.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
have a
don't you?
limited
I mean, you
number.
Yeah, I
probably
think-
got, like we said, there's probably three
Three.
houses that qualify under the
Yeah.
criteria that we have here.
And only one of them already has a pad, so we're probably down
Under
to two.
these criteria, but you could say, no, we don't think it ought to be limited to that. Anybody who wants one can have it. That's what I said. I'm not trying to tell you this is, forgive the pun, but set in stone. I'm saying, give us your opinion. If you think anybody in the historic district or elsewhere, historic district is what you're weighing in on, anybody in the historic district should be able to put a pad in, so long as it meets certain criteria, fine. Tell us that. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but at least we get your input,
With the city, would that be grandfathered in if it's already a pad there to park?
There wasn't a pad there until this just
No, I'm
happened.
talking about not in the history, I'm talking about the whole city.
That's a whole different issue, not for us.
Yeah,
though.
I know that, but I'm just wondering.
And
You
we.
know, you can't grandfather a violation of law. If it was,
Yeah.
if it was not against the law when the pad was poured, then that's a non-conforming use, and
Yeah.
that's a whole different
Right,
ballgame.
okay, well, I want to get in that. I was just curious.
Okay, I'm going to open the floor to public comment, and we do have 3 people waiting on the phone. So I'm going to take those first.
Leave unless you need to come back. Let me know.
Hello, your line is open. Give us your name and address for the record.
John Boat, 220 South 4th Street.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Boat.
I've lived in the historic districts 20 plus years now, and we have enough negative visuals at present. Adding right-of-way parking will add to that negativity. The city, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, installed a concrete pad in front of 313 Emmett Street. And that's a perfect reference for a negative. It looks like people drain their oil on it. We have cars sitting in the neighborhood that's been there since my daughter was in high school, and she's in her 6th year of college now. The last thing the historic district needs is more negative views.
Thank you, Mr. Bout.
Thank you for your time.
Hello, Historic Preservation Board. Give your name and address for the record, please.
Tony Harwell, 215 Dodge Street.
Oh, I lost you. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tony. Go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to comment on the parking pad. There hasn't really been a problem in the neighborhood until the streets got changed around, and some of the people that were using the off-street parking that was there that got removed don't have a place to park anymore. But the code is set up this way for a reason. It's been this way for a long time. Most cities in Florida and in the country have similar codes like this. They have them for a reason. If you start monkeying with it, it's going to change a lot of things. One of the things that's going to happen is, especially this one, it's written in a manner that you have to have access to your backyard. Well, there's nothing in our code that says you have to have access to the backyard, to the vehicle, I mean. Our current residential current setbacks, for the most part, on the side are 5 feet. So if you start saying that people can't get to the backyard with a vehicle, then you're going to have to change the setbacks and make them greater than whatever a car needs, 10 feet or 15 feet.
Okay.
There's a whole domino effect that happens with this.
Okay.
Not to mention the aesthetics of it. As the previous caller said, you can go by 313 Emmett Street and see exactly what's going to happen. For the 3 properties that are listed, there's really only one there that has a problem with parking. 213 Kirkland used to park at Hammock Hall and in a little recess. It can park on the side of its house as soon as they get rid of the utility pole. They put the power pole over so they could have access, but now the utility company, you just come and take their pole out. As soon as that happens, they'll have access. The one that doesn't have is the apartment building on 315 Kirkland, and there's never been a problem there. They use the neighbor's property and the backyard. And there's some would say that they have access to the side yard if they cut the trees. 513 Emmett, they don't have direct parking, but they can parallel park in their front yard if they choose to. So there's really no reason to change the entire city code.
Okay, Mr. Howell, please wrap it up.
Things.
Thanks.
There's no reason to change the whole city code just to accommodate, one person.
Okay, thank you so much. You want to speak to this?
All I want to say is that the only reason the backyard comes into play is that if you can access your backyard by traveling down your side yard, then you theoretically have some place where you could park besides the front yard or the right of way. That's the only reason I mentioned that. So basically, not being able to access the backyard would be a criteria of your being able to get a parking pad. Because theoretically, if you could get to your backyard by traveling on your property, not the neighbors, not trespassing, you can get to your backyard by traveling down your side yard, then you have an option. It may not be the option you want, but you have an option that doesn't require you to park in the right of way of the street. So it wasn't I'm trying to encourage parking in the backyard nor prohibit it. I'm just saying that may not be a good alternative for people, but at least it's an alternative to parking on the street. So if you have that alternative, you wouldn't qualify for the parking pad in the right of way. And as far as the rest of it, I don't have knowledge of whether there's oil on 313, and not really trying to to get into that. Obviously, if there's oil on the concrete, then that's oil that would have been in the grass and in the soil if the concrete weren't there.
Thank you. Hello, could you please give your name and address for the public record, please?
Yes, I want to thank all of you for and your service to the betterment of the city. I'm Pam Garris, and I live in Polacca County. I'm going to turn my computer down because I think you may be getting some feedback from the sound because you're delayed on my computer. My family has owned commercial property in the city at 110 Highway 19 South since 1977. I previously lived at 603 Emmett Street in the South Historic for 3 years, which my family purchased in 1991, and my mother and father restored it to its current use as a B&B, which is now the Grand Gables Inn, operated there since 2016. I have researched what is usual and customary practices in progressive cities seeking renewal and preservation of their historic areas and districts. Where residential parking is needed in their historic areas by homeowners or guests, it is addressed by allowing parking on the street and along the curb. Parking is not aesthetically pleasing or allowed on the right-of-way, being the grassy area between the curb and the sidewalk. Concrete parking pads are not allowed in front of homes. Examples of best practices parking in historical districts can be seen in the nation's oldest city in St. Augustine, Florida, and I have seen this where they assign parking spaces to homeowners in the street along the curb. If you go there, you'll see that. My question now is, when is the parking pad at 415 Emmett? And I believe the other callers were calling it 313. I think I looked it up and it's 415. It's at the very end of Emmett Street at Laurel. And there's one at Kirkland, and I believe Mr. Harwell addressed the issue there that one is not really required in the South Historic District, and when are they going to be removed? These parking pads are setting a non-historical precedent, which also becomes visually undesirable with staining with oil and other petroleum residue. And as Mr. Holmes said, the city code now does prohibit parking in the right-of-way in the front or side of homes. And it's my opinion that if granted a parking pad, which I don't see except in very, very unusual circumstances, that the city should not pay for these parking pads. When you buy into a historic district, you know that what you see is what you get. And as I said, some cities have made exception with assigning parking along the street curb. Another issue which needs to be addressed in the historic districts is specifically in the South Historic on Emmett Street. I've witnessed a house where vehicles, boats, skiffs are parked in the front yard of this home. I assume this is a code enforcement issue, but if it's not in the code, it's an extremely offensive practice, and the people who own large commercial work vehicles or on residential, have parked this on residential property of the right of way, they should be required to find parking and storage in an appropriate facility.
Excuse me, Ms. Garris, you do have to kind of wrap it up. We're hitting a 3-minute mark.
Okay, so these practices will elicit negative views and comments from many visitors who are seeking to buy historic or other properties and residents of the historic areas give witness to these negative comments by visitors who summarily exit. They are horrified by what they see. This is not my words. These are people who live there now, and I noticed it when I lived there. With these code enforcement issues and non-conforming accepted parking practices, Polacca will never be viewed in a positive light regarding the presentation of historic resources. A city's lack of action to renew these resources.
We do have to let you go. And also, they are code
Not
enforcement
important to
issues.
its leadership and citizens who will not speak up. Thank you, Ms. Correa.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Public comment from the audience, please.
Could you bring up that PowerPoint? It's only going to take 60 seconds.
Name and address for the record, please.
Vito Russo, 415 Emmett Street. And before I get into this, I wanted to thank the Preservation Board for facilitating the roof repair on Marcia and Michelle's homes. I do. That's what we need to do, facilitate the improvement of the city rather than throwing up roadblocks. In regards to the off-street parking, this is a non-issue. It's a non-issue because of decades of allowing it. Precedent. We've had decades and decades of precedent of parking off-street in the historic districts. So, to me, this is just a non-issue, and there's no alternatives. There is no alternatives. We have a 16-foot wide streets. And if somebody's parked on the opposite side of your driveway, you simply cannot pull out. And a reflection of that is the accidents that are already occurring because of this. Basically, Brian Bergen backed into a car. June Thompson backed into a car. Jeff Jacobs backed into a car. And my car has been backed into. So the idea that we're going to force everybody on the street is really not workable. These three people that are making these complaints don't have this issue. And if they did, they would not be complaining about off-street parking. I think that's very, very simple. Someone would have a cow if they were blocked into their driveway. So the city's never believed in it. They've never enforced it. And I just don't understand why this is even an issue, because we don't have an alternative. So if we could just run through a couple of slides, that would make my point. So non-issue because of decades of precedent, no alternatives. The city doesn't believe in the codes, hasn't enforced it. If you are parked in the street, you're across the street from a driveway, you're simply blocking. You simply can't pull out. So can I see the next slide? So if Mr. Harwell if this is such an important issue for Mr. Harwell, that was a picture of him parking in the right of way rather than the street yesterday. That was yesterday. And I've got dozens of these pictures of Mr. Harwell parking off street. So I'm not sure why he is making such an issue of this, because he can easily park in the street or he can easily park in his backyard, but he's parking in the right of way. So why is he making this an issue? I don't know. Pam Garris doesn't live in our community. She has no standing. She has no standing. Do you think St. Augustine wants to hear from people living in Polacca?
Okay, well, we're not going to go into that.
Okay, so and the votes had a situation where they were blocked. They'd have a cow. So I'm not sure why this is such an issue. So go to the next slide. So now, how is that not aesthetically pleasing versus having a D curb and forcing people to park in the street? That is obviously much more appealing than the alternative. Next slide. Now, what is wrong with that? How is that not aesthetically pleasing? That's a concrete pad with brick trim all around it and landscaped. So that does not take away from the historic district. That actually adds to the character of the historic district. That versus a D curb parked in the street. Now, it's obvious. It's a no-brainer. So That's what basically the code should allow. The code should be allowing things like this, some kind of decorative substrate. Next picture. So, I mean, the code needs to be amended, and the code needs to be amended to allow off-street parking for passenger vehicles, but restricted, no boats, no RVs. And it should have some type of landscaping, brick, pavers, concrete, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hello, could you please give your name and address for the record?
Tony Harwell,
Okay, go ahead.
15 Dodge Street. Just wondering if when the parking pad that was replaced at 313 Emmett Street will be coming up, since it doesn't fit in with the parameters of the new issue that we're talking about.
I don't know that that's something we want to discuss at this venue right now. We were only tasked to give recommendations regarding which way to go with this ordinance to the city commission. So that's what we've got to focus on, Mr. Howell.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, any further public comment? Public comment closed. Okay. Board members, do we have any thoughts or input on this whole discussion?
I think we're damned if we do and damned if we don't.
I think that was why Mr. Holmes let us do this.
Thank you very much.
See?
But we're not the final say-so, so that's.
No,
just
it's the
recommendation.
commission. So we need to come up with recommendations or what we think is in the best interest of the districts. That's what our focus should be. And that's all it should be. Not personalities, not who's upset with whom, but what is the best option or alternative, or leave it the way it is, whatever our recommendation is. So what are your thoughts? There's no thoughts here. Larry, do you have any thoughts, Mr. Beaton?
Yes, I do. I do have some thoughts.
Okay.
A couple of the public comments, I believe, beg the question about who foots the bill for this work. And I do think that that's probably something that needs to be identified if they're either with the existing ordinance or if the ordinance is modified. We're talking if someone comes before the city and wants to have a parking space, if it's decided to permit parking between the street and the sidewalk, if there's a cut in the curbing that's required to lower it and the placement of the pad itself, I think the homeowner should bear the full cost of that. And that needs to be clearly identified to anyone who's wanting to do something like that. I have to say that I am not a fan of parking between the street and the sidewalk. I just don't think in the historic district, and we were asked to comment about an ordinance that's a citywide ordinance, and I think that's a little beyond the purview of this committee. So my comments are strictly associated with the properties within the two historic districts. But I think that you know, I would love to see an alternative to, so there's not parking between the public street and the sidewalk. You know, I really don't have a problem personally with someone parking in a front yard in a driveway with the car visible from the street. In other words, if there's not a driveway access to the property now, create one and have them park between their house and the sidewalk. I think that, to me, looks better than parking between the sidewalk and the street. But that, again, that's just my personal opinion about that. The only thing, if this committee does recommend allowing this, I do think the composition of the surface of the material is important. I think a concrete pad just doesn't fit in the historic district. And I think brick or some type of pavers, or maybe even a surface where you do have a mix of soil and hard material that would allow penetration into the soil would be more fitting in a historic district than just a concrete pad. So that's my comments.
Excuse me, I have another board meeting I have to go to, so I'm gonna take leave. It's not that I'm not interested, but I have to be
Okay.
somewhere else, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that was Mr. Beaton's input. Anybody else?
I don't think parking should be in the front yard.
Okay.
I
and-
don't,
yeah.
I didn't see, I didn't think that the parking that had been done in front of the Gables was offensive to me with the pavers and things and
With
the
the bricks, and they
landscaping.
actually came before our board and the planning board, and with the final, obviously, approval from the city commission for installing the antique bricks and that cut right away. But I kind of agree. I think the materials need to be reviewed and submitted to this board. I also think the cost should be covered by the owner, personally. I don't think the city, that's an additional. Again, when you buy into a historic district, you buy into it with all the pluses and minuses, and you know going forward that is the case, that parking is limited. So, I mean, my personal opinion, and it's an opinion or thought, is that if somebody wants to make a request like that, it should come before this board. It should be on a case-by-case basis. They should have to bear the cost, and the materials have to be specified, and they should be impermeable, and they should be in keeping with the architecture and history of the neighborhood. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Or
Well,
what
I agree with
recommendation?
everything you just said about the material. I think that's very important. The brick, the slabs don't look good.
Yeah.
If it was brick or something. Also, I feel as though it's probably better for somebody to come before the board, get permission to do that than it is to just park on the grass. And then the grass is ruined, everything gets broken down. You know, that just looks bad all the way around. So if it were on a case-by-case basis, and only if they were in a situation where they don't have
Any other option already?
another option, right?
Right.
If you had no place to go but the street, and you were willing to bear the cost, at least we should listen to it, I think, and ones that have already been done. Jonathan, you said there's two? And the city did those already. Maybe they could be requested, or maybe the city could dress them up a little bit. You know, put some brick or.
CRA, but CRA does call for brick parking areas, so there is a CRA plan calls for it.
I mean, what's really the difference if you had a driveway entrance to your property, right? If you had an opening into a driveway, it would be probably the same space. Oh, sorry. Same amount of space, roughly.
Well, yeah. Again, if we're looking at the property or the inventory, this really only applies to, I don't even know about the north side, Jonathan. Do you have a gauge for the North Historic District? We're probably,
I was not able to find any properties on
Okay.
the north side that would qualify under the scenario presented here.
So
okay.
just
So
three
we're talking,
properties.
we're talking 3 properties maybe at best, and 2 have cement pads already.
Yes, to clarify that, one of the 3 properties, once AT&T removes their infrastructure off of the
Right.
pole
The one on
that's there,
Kirkland, yeah.
it is possible to remove the pad and put a driveway apron in so they could access their side yard, and that has been set in motion. Unfortunately, we don't control it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I couldn't hear Jonathan's comments.
Jonathan, could you come up, please? Because it is hard to hear from there. And give your name for the record and your role.
Mr. Beaton, is that better?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Jonathan Griffith, General Services Director for the City of Polacca. What I was saying is on the north side, we were unable to identify any properties that would qualify under this exception that's presented to you. On the south side, there are 3 properties, one of which, once AT&T removes their infrastructure off of the pole and the pole is then removed, we'll be able to remove the parking pad and put the driveway apron in, just as we've done for every other property owner. One of the parking pads in place is in front of a residence that would not qualify underneath the scenario. And the third, which Mr. Holmes referred to, we just left a curb cut in the event that this is approved by the city commission ultimately, so that that resident could come forward and request a parking apron.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so would anybody like to put into words a recommendation to give to the commission from this board?
No, but I have a question.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of all the millions of places I've lived. And I know that in some places you can only park on one side of the street. That opens up, those are narrow streets. That opens up room for cars to come and go. Is that a viable solution here? I don't
Mr.
understand.
Griffith?
Depends on who's backing out of the driveway.
See how I can say this as simple as possible.
Yes or no?
Yes and no.
Oh.
Some of the roads are not wide enough to facilitate on-street parking. We would be worried about emergency ingress and egress. The reason we're proposing this is it's a standard solution that gets that parking out of the travel lane. And it also keeps them out of the pedestrian zone of the right-of-way too. So yes and no, because you have some existing roads that were 16 foot wide that we left at 16 foot wide. You have some that are at 21, which is our standard.
Mm-hmm.
So on those larger roads, like a 24 foot wide road in a residential area, yes, you could accommodate it, but not in the South District. No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And again, most of the properties do have off-street parking with the exception of the few that were mentioned. So unless they have company that's parking on the street, the residents are actually able to do that, park off-street.
May I make a very final comment?
You may come up and do that quickly because public comment is closed, please. Name and address again.
Vito Russo, 415 Emmett. This discussion has brought up a very critical point of view, and that is the emergency vehicles ingress, egress. You've got 16 foot wide streets. If you have cars parked on both sides of that street, you have taken up at least, what, 12 feet?
Mhm.
Because cars are 6 feet wide. So what does that leave you? You can't get an emergency vehicle in and out of there. So, this is a non-issue. We've been parking off street since they invented the automobile. And there are a boatload of people in the south side parking off street into the grass. Now I don't see how the with the brick border that I have made is not aesthetically pleasing to the neighborhood. I just don't see how that is less pleasing than parking on the grass or having a D curb and parking on the street. I mean, to me, this is a non-issue. I don't understand
Thank you. And I don't think we're suggesting that. I mean, I think Ms. Reese just asked if they could be just parking on one side of the street. And then we've also discussed the fact that most people can park off-street, company excluded. But that, by and large, it's not an issue except for a few properties. Okay, again, do we have a recommendation that we want to bring forth?
If you would help me, I will do that.
Okay.
All right, I recommend that we accept the proposal of similar to what Robbie mentioned.
Okay, which was that it would be on a case-by-case basis, right? And the cost would be covered by the owner. It would have to meet certain criteria, as in there were no other parking off-street options, and that the materials would have to be specified. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Did we get all of that, or did it
Well,
make any
because
sense?
basically all the 2 or 3 properties, there's nobody else really that's going to meet the criteria from what you've said.
Right.
We've
but
already-
If we
I mean, there are-
specify
it
they have
already-
to use certain materials, they may.
We're
it's
kind of
at their
going
cost.
after the fact now. It's already been done.
Well,
Well, he
except
said
that
they
it
could be taken
hasn't
up.
been done except to 2 properties, and one of them is probably going to have that removed once the AT&T whenever that happens, AT&T does what they need to do to remove the pole and the connections, then they'll have a curb cut and the ability to have a driveway. So that one will be then taken out.
I'm just saying that there's not likely to be any more requests.
Oh, no, that's wrong. There's gonna be quite a few people on the south side who are gonna request off-street parking pads.
Case by case basis.
Even though they have the ability to get to their backyard or,
Yeah, Michelle Chanson is a prime example. She would want a Miami curb in front of her house.
Who? I'm sorry, excuse me.
Michelle Chanson. she's in
Michelle
five-
Johnson. Okay.
She's in 500 block of Emmett Street. She had off-street parking and that got taken up. And she would like that. She was scheduled to have a parking pad poured there before this big
Okay,
brouhaha started.
and Tony, you've had enough public comment too. The point being that it would be on a case-by-case basis rather, and there would be certain criteria, i.e. there were no other parking options off-street. No offense, Ms. Jensen has a driveway and a portico. So let's just leave that at that, but that she would have to come forth and make that request. So we just leave it at that.
Let me say one thing about your recommendation. Limit it to passenger vehicles,
Yeah,
no RVs, no boats.
I agree with that.
yeah.
I mean, we agree with, do we agree
Yes.
with that?
Only,
Okay.
only,
Yes.
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair,
Larry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say, do we, in our recommendation to the city commission, do we want to say that our recommendations are strictly recommendations for the
For the
two
district.
designated historic districts?
yes.
I think that's, we can say that, but I think that's a given.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's a given. So, and so it will be limited to automobiles only. This option.
Passenger automobiles.
Passenger vehicles.
What does that mean? A bus, a train?
An
An RV, a passenger?
I think a truck, I mean,
No,
if somebody, that's the only
Well,
vehicle
that's
they have.
yeah, okay. Okay, okay. Yeah, I have one of those, okay. No, I'm only kidding. Yeah, so that's fine. I think it's
No
just.
commercial vehicles, let's say that.
Right, but an RV is not considered commercial either,
Oh,
really.
okay.
or,
Boats, yeah,
Boats,
well, I think we
RVs,
know, but
kind of a
they
separate
have to
thing.
be able to put it into words that can be understood.
Yeah,
Our recommendation needs to be clear, and that was not very clear, and I didn't write it down.
right, well, I,
Do we, Linda, did you get all of that? Or Sonny? Okay, thank you. Okay,
Can you
anything else
make
that
it
we want to
clear
say
what we
about
were
this
saying?
particular issue, or are we done with it? Go ahead, Mr. Griffith. I know, one second. I
She
just want to
needs
see if
to
we have
read it
anything else
back
to
for
say about
us.
it, if we had wrapped that piece of it up. Okay. Do we have a motion for this recommendation?
I move that,
Okay, Larry moved. Do we have a second?
second.
Second from
I
Laura,
wanna-
all
I
in
want to hear
favor?
them, I want to hear the motion again first.
Okay, could you read the motion off, please, if it's possible?
Yes, it accept proposal on a case-by-case basis. They have to meet certain criteria, which means no other parking is available, paid for by the homeowner, and they have to present material per each one. Also that strictly to the historic district, and it should be limited to passenger vehicles, no RVs, no boats.
I think the only other thing to add to that would be the water and sewer, the utility, blocking the utilities. Okay, and I think that's in the city's recommendation.
And maybe put no larger than a certain dimension,
The parking pad has to be,
Your code already
It already
covers
covers
the
that.
parking dimensions. It would be qualified as a parallel parking dimension. The code already spells out that.
okay, thank you, Jonathan.
The no other parking option needs to be dropped. Because if you have a family.
This is not, wait a minute, we're out of public comment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But if you have a family with a bunch of cars.
Then they
you
don't
have
move.
One driveway, that eliminates the option.
Okay, but that's again, something when you buy into the district, you have to, it's already in place. The ordinance is pretty much in place. This is just a variant of it. And the fact is, if you buy in the district, you need to realize that.
And this is just our recommendation.
And it's a recommendation that will go, the
It's not-
commission ultimately will make the final decision. Anyway, I think we've got it all. Are we satisfied with that?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Any staff comments beyond these things? No. Any other?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would like staff to, sometime during this calendar year, to consider the application of another historic preservation grant for a citywide study of historic structures.
That would be through the CLG, Certified Local Government Program, and that application was filed a couple of years ago. It did not get approved or awarded. But I think, again, that's what you're talking about, Larry, right? Applying for a Certified Local Government grant?
Yes,
To do the site survey or an updated site survey?
an updated site survey. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Jonathan's getting that painful look. And we're not necessarily talking about Miss Tucker taking that on.
There probably is language from the application that did not get approved that might be used again.
As a starting point, and
Yeah.
Mr. Crow, Thad Crow did that when he was the planning director, just for historic perspective.
It might
Yes.
be a boilerplate, just.
Anything else? Okay, looks like we have nothing else. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Okay,
I will second it.
okay, we're done. It's all over. Thank you.